if we look at the rest of the world, how are we doing in comparison to how everyone else is shopping online?
Coming back to that statistic I mentioned at the earlier on, that about 1.5% or slightly less than 1.5% of our spend on consumer products is online. In the UK and the States it's closer to 14%, so it shows that they are significantly ahead of us. I think that the reasons for that are, are numerous. They've got better bandwidth, there are fewer constraints, people are more accustomed to buying online. But the market is growing in South Africa, and it's growing exponentially. Every year we see significant increase in the amount that we are buying.
So how are we comparing to the rest of Africa then?
I think that we're certainly ahead of the rest of Africa. I mean, I suppose it largely depends on what do we mean by e-commerce. In Kenya, the M-Pesa e-banking solution has been so widely adopted that currency hardly changes hands in Kenya. Everything is done virtually. So I suppose it largely depends on what our absolute definition of e-commerce is. But if we're talking about it in the context of visiting a website to buy a product, South Africa is way ahead of the rest of the continent.
Now, for a budding entrepreneur who's watching this and has a product or a service to deliver but doesn't have the capacity for a brick and mortar store, is online the best place to be looking?
I think it's certainly a great place to look. My advice to any budding entrepreneur would be to prove concept first. Building a good, high-quality e-commerce site or store is going to cost you an awful lot of money. So before you go and invest a couple of $100,000 in building a website, rather work with one of the existing platforms, Shopify, ShopDirect, ShowMe. There are many platforms that will effectively rent you a corner of their existing e-commerce infrastructure. So make sure that your product and that your service works. I think the second point is to pick something that's very niche. If you're a generalist, you will run into an awful lot of competition. But if you pick a niche product, you'll do well. Good examples of organizations that do very well in niches. Yuppie Chef is brilliant in the kitchenware, cookware space. Chris Williams' Cycles has really managed to nail the online cycle market. In the wine space, there are a couple of very good online wine retailers. In fact, quite an interesting anecdote. One of the things I buy quite regularly online is wine. Yesterday morning, just as I got into the office of sitting down with my cup of coffee, I get an email from the shop that I regularly buy from saying, "Charlie, we're worried about your wine drinking habits." And so I opened it up, and I hadn't bought anything from them for a couple of months. And it was just a nice humorous aside, and prompted me to go place an order with them. So I think that that again speaks to what budding entrepreneurs need to do. They need to speak to their audience. They need to speak to the audience in the language that they would do if they were conversing with friends. You've got to be familiar online. I think another trick that they can potentially look at is making sure that when they load products onto their websites, that they write compelling product descriptions and they take really good product shots. Unfortunately, all too many websites take manufacturer-supplied descriptions and product shots, and because an awful lot of retailers or e-tailers rely on Google to push search traffic, to push people onto their website from search engines don't like what they term duplicate content. So if you're merely repurposing or using somebody else's product description, you're going to struggle. In fact, at Roger Wilker, we've recently set up our own photography studio, so we're able to take good 360-degree product shots. Earlier this year, the Interactive Advertising Bureau did some research on some of the challenges of e-commerce in South Africa. And they found that one of the reasons people are most resistant to buying product is because they're simply not being given enough information. There aren't enough videos or photographs or strong enough product descriptions around the items that are for sale. So if you want to set up an online business, channel an awful lot of time and energy into getting compelling product descriptions and getting beautiful photography. And the rest really should take its course. You will sell.
And I suppose we see that every time we get a delivery from Yuppie Chef with a personalized note, all of a sudden I think, hey, I want to spend a bit more time and money
Absolutely.
on the Yuppie Chef website. Absolutely.
And I mean, if you think about it in the context of a traditional bricks and mortar experience, if the shop assistant who's dealing with you at the counter smiles or says something nice, you're going to be far more inclined to go back there than if they're grumpy. And so the Yuppie Chef example of, yes, putting in a personalized note, it really makes the experience special. It makes it something to talk about. And in a social universe, we buy stuff that our friends recommend. So if you as an e-tailer can convince your friend to talk about the shopping experience they had with you, you are going to sell an awful lot of product.
Now, finally, before I let you go, I know a lot of South Africans, and as unfounded as this is, have concerns about handing over our credit card information just into the big, wide internet. Is this something that we really should be concerned about when it comes to making purchases online?
Yeah, if you're going to buy something online, then the first thing you have to do is make sure that the site is secure, or that the payment gateway that's being used to conduct the transaction is secure. That'll always have a little padlock up at the top left. But really, no, we don't need to worry about it. I mean, I would be just as concerned handing my credit card to a guy in a restaurant as I would be punching the details into the internet.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's an absolute pleasure, thank you.